prison. They did. It's been 3 years. But when you've got people who are on misdemeanor charges for having walked into a building at 4 p.m. after the riot, and I know some of these people, they walked into a building for 2 minutes and walked out, and they got 18 months for that. I don't see you defending the innocent people who walked onto a public grass at a public building after a riot had been completed. You don't know, you don't care. You've taken a tribal position. And
in this video, Tim Pool welcomed some liberal kid named Luke Beasley on his show, Timcast IRL. When the subject of the people charged with crimes on January 6th arises, Luke Beasley provides multiple uninformed arguments, and Tim Pool literally loses it. With that, let's watch Tim Pool verbally assault woke snowflake Luke Beasley.
The month that they should get, I do respect the fact that they were prosecuted in a court of law, and I don't think Trump, to send a message to his base that what happened on January 6th was good, which is why he would do such a pardon, should be pardoning folks who were violent. Or
I think 3 years is long enough.
Yeah, and that's a wrong stance, but okay.
How is it wrong?
I just explained it to you.
No. You didn't. You said the court process should play out the way it is. My opinion on the amount of time should be served for a crime is not just wrong because you like courts.
No, I get that.
You need to explain
I'm saying
why the time frame I'm asserting should be longer than 3 years.
No, I'm saying the default, you have to have overwhelming, compelling evidence that someone has been wronged to justify a president stepping in and saying, I'm subverting the justice system outcome. Do you agree with that premise?
No.
That's immoral.
So you're making a fascist argument.
A fascist argument?
You are making the fascist argument that the hierarchical structure of government is just and should be upheld regardless.
Why? Okay, I'm not going to ask that. This is
right. And so the system we have is
I'm just not loving, and this is a way of celebrating violence, that Trump is celebrating those as far as a pardon and in his rhetoric and in his national anthem thingy, people who attacked the Capitol. Why did they attack it? Because they believed lies about the election.
There's a variety of reasons why people were violent on January 6th. Largely that they believe the election was stolen.
You could just be like, hey, that's bad. You don't have to keep going.
I've called for their arrest and prosecution. Like, this is not a shock to my audience.
My reporting is responsible for the arrest of a couple of January 6th
My point is that if you've got somebody on a misdemeanor charge who's been held without trial, a pardon makes perfect sense, unless you're a fascist. And the system is...
Yeah, it's clear from the jump here that this kid is way out of his league. It's also clear that he's just spouting Democrat talking points, because what happens with a lot of liberals that do that is if you peel the layer back at all, there's just nothing to back up their argument. He's suggesting that if Donald Trump pardons folks that were involved in January 6th, that he's promoting violence. He clearly doesn't understand that these people are being held, all of them, for an inordinate amount of time compared to the typical punishment that they'd receive for the same crime had it not been so high profile. Also, this kid's dismissing the fact that, like Tim referred to, people have been held for a long time with zero due process. That is fascism. That is not the American justice system. And all those people that are so worried about Donald Trump weaponizing the DOJ, well, maybe you should have thought about that when you were treating these folks the way you are, purely to send a message and purely to punish your political opponents. I am not advocating for anybody to weaponize the justice system, but Democrats, don't forget that this is just one small way in which you have abused the justice system to go after your political opponents. So I don't want to hear it. Anyway, let's get back to the video.
Is just. So it's like Benjamin Franklin, who said it is better that 100 guilty persons escape than one innocent person suffer. You've taken the Otto von Bismarck approach of it is better that 10 innocent people suffer than one guilty person escape.
No.
Yeah.
Well, okay, you have.
No,
right?
I haven't.
No, stop. You don't know anything about these January 6 cases. You don't know why these people are in jail. You don't know that a man is in Brooklyn right now for 3 years without charge or trial. And when Donald Trump says these people have been held for too long, you say, no, Trump is wrong. Keep them locked up. That's fucking fascist. Dude, you've been sitting here with no knowledge of the specifics of some of these cases. There is a man in Brooklyn right now, I'm going to say it again, no charges whatsoever brought. He's been in jail for 3 fucking years. For you to sit there and say it is good that he remains locked up is fascism. That is saying the hierarchical system of the courts and the government is just, and the process is all that matters. And I am saying perhaps 3 years is enough, because I actually have moral logic and an understanding of these cases. Hence, my position on January 6th has always been the people who have attacked police must go to prison. But 3 years is a fucking long time for assault on an officer. We have seen people on the far left, notably when they were firebombing shit all across Minnesota, 33 people murdered, and how many criminal charges did we get for this? When they firebombed a police station and forced the police to evacuate. On May 29th, 2020, when thousands of far leftists firebombed the White House grounds and set fire to St. John's Church and injured 100 police officers, how many fucking people went to prison for 3 years? How many of them who never showed up on that day are in prison for 20 years? Enrique Tarrio wasn't even in D.C. on January 6th, and you are saying that man who his only crime was, quote, don't leave. That's his only crime. You think he should be in prison for 20 years because you're a fascist. You don't care what the facts are. You don't care if this is unjust. You only care that the machine state has decreed you are not to be locked up. And this is the problem I have with the left.
If you like watching videos like this one, like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Let's get back to the video.
They don't know the facts. They don't care about the facts. They view morality as a blanket government stroke of the pen, and every person, regardless of their crime, should be in prison for decades. I reject it outright. The people who fought cops should go to prison. They did. It's been 3 years. But when you've got people who are on misdemeanor charges for having walked into a building at 4 p.m. after the riot, and I know some of these people, they walked into a building for 2 minutes and walked out, and they got 18 months for that. I don't see you defending the innocent people who walked onto a public grass at a public building after a riot had been completed. You don't know, you don't care. You have taken a tribal position and people are suffering because of it. Now you say that Donald Trump saying the injustice that we've seen warrants commutation or pardons, you say that means he's advocating for violence. This is the ultimate problem. Then you cite a press release from Maryland saying, but the right's more violent. There is a distinction between a white supremacist as a right-wing group and a run-of-the-mill Christian conservative who showed up on that day not to protest. Let's talk about Brandon Strzok. He never went in the building. He was on the other side of the building. There was a permitted protest. He walked up the stairs and he was yelling. They put this guy in prison. There is Owen Schroyer, who was at a permitted rally, who was yelling death to communists. They put him in prison and specifically cited his speech. My dude, you don't know what you're talking about. And it's fine. I get it. We try to be polite. We try to be nice. But there are so many young liberals who sit here and say, the corporate press told me that these people are bad, and the machine state government has decreed it by pen. So I don't care what crime they committed. I don't care what the jury said. I don't care who was on the jury. Enrique Tarrio, who was not there, should be in prison for 2 decades.
This is why you got to be careful with either political party propping up somebody to speak for you. Like, I don't know where this kid came from. I don't know if he's a paid shill or what. But you got to be careful that the person is sharp and educated on the topics they're discussing. Because if you notice, and I hated interrupting Tim's verbal lashing of this guy, but if you notice, typical debates, you know, people are yelling over each other, trying to get their point in. The reason he's not doing that, he has absolutely nothing to respond to Tim about. I guarantee that this kid, during the BLM riots, all the murders that happened, as Tim mentioned, police station being burnt down, I guarantee that this kid was not advocating for any punishment for those folks. In fact, he probably didn't know a thing about politics at that time because he's so young. He probably doesn't even have a frame of reference for that. I'm completely biased, but the right is clearly more reasonable. I can't argue with a single thing Tim has said here. Everyone I know on the right wing says January 6th was dumb. They denounce it. No one's proud of it. No one defends people that broke the law. But when these people get outrageous sentences or no due process, that's a problem. And so for Donald Trump to pardon those folks because of injustice, that's literally like the definition of injustice, what's happening to these folks. And I like something Tim said there. It's just making the same point I did, but I like the term he used, tribal position. This kid's whole argument is based on, well, Trump said this, so I disagree, and I'm going to craft some flimsy argument as to why I disagree. And then when Tim presses him at all, He has sat there silent, just like a beaten dog that knows he did something wrong. Anyway, let's get back to the video.
Tell me this now. Why is Enrique Tarrio in prison?
Yeah, so they uncovered with him his plot to overthrow the government.
Enrique Tarrio's?
Yeah, and his organization.
What plot? Who's they? Give me some
prosecutors.
Give me some fucking data. Stop squinting at me and saying the prosecutors did a thing. You didn't know. You didn't read it. You didn't read the court papers. All you know is the fascist machine state told you he should be in prison, and you're saying yes to them. Tell me why. Give me the data.
I understand that laws on the books have been there for a long time that I agree with, that if it's proven that you had a plan and you wanted to act on it, and then days after.
What's the proof?
The proof is
say the proof.
Forward by prosecutors.
Say it.
Communications between.
What communications? What did he say? What did he do?
Is this serious?
Are you going to tell me why you think Enrique Tarrio should be in prison for 20 years, or are you going to say the government decreed it?
I just explained to you.
So the government said so. Is that it?
It's usually law enforcement, which I guess is part of the government.
Government said so?
Yep.
Law enforcement
that uncovers evidence of communications, a memo that he crafted. And
first of all, in the most armed country in the world, do you honestly think that a plot to overthrow the government would include 0 weapons? Did all of these gun owners that were going to overthrow the government just leave their weapons at home? To me, that's something not a lot of people bring up. And I think that says it all right there. I'm going to be very clear with my stance on this. There was no plot to overthrow the government. It was a protest that got out of control. Property was damaged. People were attacked. Police were attacked. I don't support any of those things. But even the FBI agents on the ground at the time said, this wasn't planned. This just got out of control. Tim says, you think Enrique Tarrio should be locked up for 20 years? And he's like, yeah, they uncovered a plan, communications of his to overthrow the government. He said, who? The prosecutors. What communications? Silence. Again, you see, he asked basic follow-up questions. This kid has no clue what he's talking about, should be embarrassed, and whoever's propping up this kid to be a spokesperson for the left should be embarrassed that they thought this was a good idea. But we want to hear from you. What did you think of this conversation between Tim Pool and this Luke Beasley kid? Let us know. Anyway, that's it for this video. As always, we really appreciate you watching, and we will see you on the next one.